Welcome back, YouTube, to another episode of 10 with Travis, where we take just 10 minutes a day to dive deeper in the Word so you can be more equipped today than you were yesterday. In today's episode, we're going to be uncovering some did you knows about Joseph, which is one of my favorite people of the Bible. So I feel like the story of Joseph is just so awesome that it's one of my favorites. I love reading about it, and every time I do, I learn a little bit something each time. So as we talked about yesterday, Joseph was one of Jacob's sons, which is a little bit of context to understanding the story of Joseph. So when Joseph was around 17 years old, he was sold into slavery by his brothers. So he told them of a dream that he had, and he interpreted it and told him, and his brothers didn't like him, and they ended up, instead of killing him, which some of them wanted to do, they just sold him into slavery. And that you can see in Genesis 37 too. So again, most people know a little bit about the Joseph story, and they know, hey, he was sold into slavery. He was in the pit, and then in the prison, and then he went to the palace. So they kind of know that he was, as they say, started from the bottom and then went to the top, from rags to riches. He was, one of those people to do that. But our first did you know is that he was sold into slavery at 17, and he didn't reach the palace with Pharaoh until he was 30 years old. So that's 13 years that he was working between there. Again, whether it be with Potiphar or in the prison, whatever the case may be, where he was at for however many years, but 13 years between slavery at 17 and going into Pharaoh's house at 30. So again, we saw in Genesis 37:2 is where it said he was 17 when he was sold into slavery. And then in Genesis 41:46, which is 4 chapters later, it says Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. So that's when Pharaoh made him right underneath him, second in command over all of Egypt. And again, like I said, there's so much about this story of Joseph. They could make a movie about it. That's how great the story is and how much information there is. So definitely go back and read those chapters. Again, it's probably like 35 to 45. I don't even know if there's 45 chapters in Genesis, but probably somewhere in that range you can go and look in and go ahead and read that in there. So what I want to talk about, again, the first did you know is just the duration, that 13 years. And then we're going to dive into, what happens in between there. So again, a lot of us feel like we're in prison and we want to go to the palace, but the thing that needs to go inside of that is the preparation. So it goes, pit, prison, preparation, palace. So a lot of us miss the preparation stage, and we don't use God's skills and tools that he has given us, the abilities God has given us in that middle section. And that's what Joseph did, and it allowed him to come out on top. So we're going to look at that. So when Joseph was in the prison, again, he wasn't complaining. He actually went to work for Potiphar, and then because Potiphar's wife, he wouldn't sleep with Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife said that Potiphar tried to, and this and that, and Potiphar threw him in prison. But then the prison guard actually gave him kind of like a role down in there. So it says in Genesis 39:21 through 23, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. In whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. So that's true preparation, and that's going to be almost identical to how we see Pharaoh view Joseph when he makes it to the top. So he had the same role and the same sort of responsibilities down there in the prison that he did in the palace. And that is something that is huge for your life, because you may feel like you're stuck somewhere, but you have to master where you're at to be able to move into somewhere else. And again, for Joseph, it was a 13-year process. Some of us, and I'm included in that, after 2, 3, 4 years, we're getting really anxious about moving up, moving into something, but we just have to continue to trust God that we know his timing is better than ours. So there at the end of chapter 39 and then moving into 40, we see that, he was not just a prisoner, but he instead had the roles in there. So when he was having that leadership role, you could say, in the prison, Pharaoh threw his cupbearer and his baker into prison because of some offense that they had committed. And when he was down in the prison, the cupbearer and the baker actually had two dreams that Joseph went ahead and interpreted. So in these dreams, again, one was positive and one was negative, but he interpreted both. So when he interpreted the dream of the cupbearer, which was a positive one, that he was going to get reinstated into, Pharaoh's, back to where he was with Pharaoh, he interpreted the dream. And then in Genesis 40:14 through 15 said, "Only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention to me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house. For I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me in the pit." So he's kind of setting himself up here for the ability to do something in the prison. And then again, he's saying, hey, if you ever get up to Pharaoh and, you need me up there, please remember that I am, Joseph, and that I have interpreted your dreams, because the cupbearer saw that the dream, eventually came through true and wanted to, move or tell someone about that, which is exactly what happened. So my notes didn't translate over to, there it is. Once I opened it up, it translated over there. So we then see in Genesis 41:8 through 14, that after Pharaoh had a dream, and again, for context, that was 2 years after the cupbearer dream. So still another 2 years here that Joseph had to wait, that the cupbearer was reinstated. Pharaoh had a dream and wanted someone to interpret it. So this is what we see in Genesis 41:8 through 14. "So in the morning, Pharaoh's spirit was troubled after he had that dream, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, 'I remember my offenses today. When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me and the chief baker in the custody of the house of the captain of the guard, we dreamed on the same night, he and I, each having a dream with its own interpretation. A young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. When we told him, he interpreted our dreams to us, giving an interpretation to each man according to his dream. And as he interpreted to us, so it came about. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged,'" because that's what Joseph interpreted the dream to be, is that he would be restored and that the baker would be hanged, and that's what happened. "Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit." So quickly brought him out of the pit. When you're needed after serving God for that long and you think that you may not get out, quickly they will bring you to where you need to go. "And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh." So just like that, after being 13 years swinging back and forth in a place that he probably didn't want to be, he is now up second in command with Pharaoh, because he interprets Pharaoh's dream. It's basically that there's going to be famine in the land. He then tells Pharaoh what a solution might be. So again, he interpreted what the problem was, and then that gave him an ability, gave him access to tell of the solution. And Pharaoh's like, yeah, you know what? That sounds like a great solution. I need you to be first in command underneath me. So that's what he did. So again, having that God-given ability, those tools to interpret the dream, allowed Joseph to have a chance to give a solution, to show what he could do, not only for Pharaoh, but for God. So that's how it is in our own life. We have to master where we're at. And then when God brings us to where we want to go, it's not hard for us, right? There's a grace that flows with us and in us and through us, that when we get to that place, we're able to continue to do what we did in the previous place, but just at a greater level. That does it for today. If this episode has blessed you and you'd like to give financially to the network so we can reach more people, we can continue to make more content, please go ahead and see the ways below to do that. If you have questions or comments, you want to drop those below or shoot us an email, we'd love to hear from you. I thank you all for watching this. I pray that as you let this soak in, you go back and read the story of Joseph, and you realize that, yes, he made Joseph successful, which is something you just see over and over. The Lord was with Joseph and he became successful. That he loves you just as much as he loved Joseph. So you can tap into that success. You can receive that success from the Lord and you can walk about it in your life. So I pray that you're able to have the revelation that God wants you to be successful, but you may first need to master where you are. So that does it for today. We will see you next time on 10 with Travis.